Carl and Liam here from Brains A Head-Banging Life, gbhblofficial.com for sure, and it's We're Afraid of the Dark, episodic recap of the TV show Are You Afraid of the Dark? We're up to episode 3 of season 2, The Tale of Locker 22, the 15th episode overall, written by Chloe Brown and directed by David Winning. So we've got ourselves a different director here. All right, not much in the way of trivia for this one. So just the cast list, really. Karen Elkin as Julie Defoe. Corey King as Chris. Jennifer Irwin as Candy Warren. John Coniskin as Mr. Schaffner. David John LeBlanc as Fritz. And Sean Tatrian as Donnie. This is Kirsten again. Kirsten, 4th story overall and 2nd for season 2.
Yeah, I can't lie, when she's telling a story, it doesn't always fill me with excitement.
Agreed. And based off the fact that we only 2 episodes ago had a terrible Kirsten story, I didn't exactly feel great about this one. But we're in the minority because everyone at the campsite is excited because it's a Kirsten story night. And she always goes above and beyond when it comes to telling stories and dressing up. They all make outlandish suggestions about what she might be dressed up at and are amazed when she turns up wearing a 1960s era hippie outfit, claiming she got it from her attic and she thinks her parents were hippies. She then hands out some trinkets to the rest before Gary speaks for me, and I feel like a lot of people, by getting pissy and impatient, wanting to know, what does this have to do with the story? Love you, Gary. Love it.
He's like, can we get on with it,
Down for it, man. And it is story time. She explains that if you don't learn from the present, you'll repeat the past and meet your doom, which, in classic Kirsten style, means fucking nothing to what actually happens.
No.
Submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society, this is the tale of Locker 22. A young French transfer student named Julie Defoe is starting at a new school, having moved to the USA, and is shown to a locker 22, which is in a decrepit part of the school. I mean, they're pushing it in regards to what this school is like, letting its students down.
I'm sure that passes all health and safety checks.
For sure. The assistant principal, Mr. Schaffner, is short and sharp with her when she complains, so she just gets on with it. Opening her locker, we see darkness and transition into a new scene as she's now in science class and fails to follow instructions, resulting in a smashed beaker. This episode off to a hot start, as you can tell.
Also, can you confirm whether or not the actress is or is not actually French?
So when I wrote about this point originally a line where I'm like, she doesn't have a French accent. Why the hell are they saying she's French? However, later in the episode, I will notice that she has a twinge. And online, I've read that she's supposed to be not French as in from France, but Canadian French.
Yeah, I was just wondering because obviously, like, I agree, her accent does appear to come and go quite a lot and does sound quite a generic sort of French accent, but it's obviously hard to know for sure. But I was thinking that if she is actually French, regardless in the episode she's meant to be, and it's probably the first time in any of these shows that the main character, has not been American or Canadian.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right on that. It is so up and down, as you say, and to be honest, man, it's irrelevant to the story.
Obviously, I'm just saying.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, it's not like it's an important aspect like that. Where she could have been from freaking Zimbabwe, and it wouldn't have made a single difference to this episode.
It's just to say she's an exchange student or whatever. That's like literally the only reason.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Class ends and 2 bullies named Fritz and Donnie. Yes, one of them is called Fritz, and I have no idea why. Mock her before a boy named Chris stands up for her, shooing them away. Nothing says really mean bullies like another boy telling them to go away and they leave. He helps her clean up the mess and is supportive, asking her about herself. Chris offers to show her around to help her find her classes, and she is grateful. But standing up, she's startled by the appearance of a teenage girl watching her. A kind of hippie-dressed teenage girl in the most, like, costume. Like, if someone said, oh, I bought a costume and I'm gone as a hippie to this party, it would look like this.
You know, when you go to a Halloween, like, fancy dress shop and they have those little pre-made packs and they have a little, like, cheesy picture on the front. That's definitely what it is, yeah.
That's it. Julie tries to speak with her, but gets no response. We do see her cry, though, which is odd. And then Chris pops back in, diverting attention. And when she looks back, the girl is gone. I wonder if it's a ghost. Lunchtime at the cafeteria. Julie is joined by the bullies Fritz and Donnie, who start the teaser and go to spit milk in her face. She ducks though, and instead Fritz gets in her face, and this starts a food fight as Julie crawls away. Mr. Schaefer arrives to break things up, but ends up covered in food as well, and is naturally enraged, looking down, seeing Julie crawling on the floor, blames her, even though she wasn't involved. I'm pretty sure she couldn't have thrown it at you, mate. Back at her locker, Julie is startled again by the mysterious hippie girl. And just as Julie starts to get frustrated with the girl, watches in shock as she vanishes before her eyes. And I was like, oh, wow. So we're not going to tease it. It just is a ghost.
At least they're not screwing around. Get to the point.
Frightened, she leaves school, but Chris follows, wondering if she's okay. She doesn't want to tell him, but trusting him, she claims she saw a ghost. That night, she then gets a prank phone call, someone claiming to be a ghost. Furious, she hangs up, and the next day she confronts Chris, who did actually, turns out, told someone else, and it's now spread around school. He tries to defend himself, but rightfully, she's pretty mad. And again, I was a bit surprised by the writing of that, because I was going to be like, oh, Fritz or Donnie overheard, and that was it. But no, Chris told someone else, and it got around. Yeah. At her locker, a ball is thrown at the door, scaring her. It's Donnie, but she does notice a beaded necklace fall out of the locker and picks it up. She's then given a small fright by Fritz, who's wearing a bedsheet and pretending to be a ghost. These kids have way too much time on their hands. And angrily, she pushes past him, going into the hallway, and takes a look at the necklace. She then sees the ghost girl and realizes the necklace she is holding is the same one around the girl's neck. And she sort of gestures for her to put it on. So Julie does, and gets transported back to the 1960s in an instant, which you can just base off the clothes, hairstyles, and trends and things like that. So yeah, time travel.
Also, isn't this a running theme with the storyteller for this episode? In that there's a ghostly girl who needs to basically who had some kind of tragic accident happen or something, who needs to be uncovered and discovered and sold to free their spirit. That is literally every story that she tells.
Yeah, the last one similar to this, Tale of the Prom Queen.
I feel like if I was there, I'd have to be like, sorry, like I'm sorry to interrupt the story, guys. I like to kill the flow, but just got to point this out.
You know, obviously Julie is baffled by what she sees, but the school seems like a much better place. And one girl greets her in hippie fashion, but calls her Candy. Baffled, Julie ends up at a locker, but is the locker of someone named Candy, evident by the yellow petal flower sticker on the front. She's then disturbed by a much younger looking Mr. Schaefer, before she takes the necklace off and appears back in her own time. Looking at her locker, she can see the residue to show that a sticker was once there. And I had a query here. So she put the necklace on, and moving around in the past is the equivalent of moving around in the present, because she moves to the locker and then reappears there. But obviously the school's layout and things might have changed. What if she was at a part of the school that had been bricked over and she took the necklace off and she appeared back in her time? Would she die because she was in a brickwork? She appeared in it.
That's exactly what I was thinking. There is a little thing near the end. It's a small where I was thinking the exact same thing, and something does happen with one of the other characters, and they sort of end up entangled within like a chair or a table or something. I was
Yeah,
thinking the exact same thing. Like that could go wrong so badly.
horribly wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
Julie goes to see Chris as school is kicking out. He's sorry about telling people about the ghost, but revealed that there's been rumors about ghosts at the school for years. Julie takes him over to a locker. She shows him the locker and points at all the things about it. Of course, none of this matters to him, as it makes no sense. What's your point? What difference does it make if there's sticker residue and all that? And he wants to go, but in an interesting touch again, Julie just goes, fuck it, puts the necklace on while holding him, and they're both transported to the past. And I was like, okay, cool. Just show him. Like, enough talking and, oh, clearly he's never going to believe you. Show him.
I did appreciate that. That wasn't one of those situations where it was like she tries to show him this magical thing and it just doesn't work for some reason, and he's like, "Oh, maybe you imagined it or something like that." No, it actually happens. He's seeing
Yep.
it. I appreciate that.
But we will get to a plot hole I think, a plot hole in a bit based off this as well. Chris is stunned, and a girl from before comes along and calls her Candy, wondering who Chris is and suggesting that he be invited over that night to listen to the Beatles' White Album. What sounds like a random dropping to try and, be like, look, hippies, Beatles and all that, but actually is an important MacGuffin almost to the story.
Mm.
Julie points out a look at a Chris and a flower sticker. He's still baffled by what has happened, but then along comes the younger Mr. Schaefer. Obviously wondering who Chris is. Chris claims to be new at the school before Mr. Schaefer addresses Julie/Candy, claiming that she's risking getting an F in chemistry and will be forced to go to summer school unless she stays late today to finish her chemistry project. Okay, fair enough.
Okay.
Okay, I did some overthinking here. And I was like, wait, what year is this? It's the 60s. And then I was like, okay. And I overthought Chris being a young black man in a school in the 1960s, right?
I did actually think about that. Yeah, I
Yeah,
can't
same.
lie.
And so I went out of my way and I spent some time, not so much because, civil rights movement was before the 60s and times were changing, but segregation in schools was a gradual thing, I found out, and all that. Now, obviously, this show could not deal with those issues and absolutely shouldn't have touched it and so on. But I would have been intrigued to sort of see them touch upon it to a certain degree, perhaps in how Mr. Schaefer, not that he's racist and whatever, but perhaps reacts almost to a degree. Instead, be considering the area, it's treated like normal, and I think it's right that they do that. But it definitely it did make me wonder, like, was there a conversation in the writing room about how to approach that?
I completely agree. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, but I think probably just like you said, because of the type of show it is, they're not going to obviously touch anything there. But
Uh,
it's definitely something that you can't deny. Maybe would have been a factor, of course.
Absolutely, but I agree. It's just right. Just ignore it. Yeah.
Mm.
Chris suspects the time travel is because of the necklace. I'm like, fucking duh. Like, yeah. And Julie takes it off and they're both transported back to modern times. And here I have an issue. She didn't touch him. She just takes it off and they both get sent back to the normal time. And I'm like, well, how does that work? Now, had she grabbed him again, I would have been okay with it.
Or are you saying that in that scene the beads weren't also over him
No,
at
because
the
she
same
puts him on her
time?
neck
Oh, so she
and then
just
takes it
puts it.
off.
I thought it was a sort of thing where like she puts the beads over them both, kind of thing. But I don't know. I
No,
wasn't paying attention.
she just takes it off like a necklace and then they both just appear back in modern times. It bugged me because to get there, she grabbed hold of him. To get back, they didn't. Now, I'm going to actually presume it was probably a mistake in filming and that it's probably like, and no one picked up on it because otherwise it's an issue for me.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
So the plan is now to find out just who Candy was. And like this episode wasn't thrilling me, if I'm honest, at this point. But I was at least like, okay, what's the mystery here? I'm into that. But the problem is that we reached this point and I went, wait, why? Like,
Mm.
what does it actually matter about, like, at this point, they have no idea about the events that will be found out in a bit. They have no idea. All they know, and they're like, well, let's find out who Candy is. Why? What does it actually matter? Like, the focus
Yeah.
should be on the fact that you've got a magical necklace that can transport you back to a specific era. That's
That's
the
what I'm saying,
focus.
man. It's one of those frustrating aspects with so many of these episodes where like, someone discovers this magical item that can do this crazy thing. She has these necklace beads that is a time machine, effectively, and she's using it to solve a mystery in a school. And upcoming, she ends up doing like an exam, a test, and it's like, man, these kids in these shows are just stuck. They could be doing so many more interesting things. It's just unrealistic. I just can imagine in real life, type thing.
I find it most baffling that at no point does she actually step outside the school, having gone back in time. Like, you would at least be like, I'm just going to see what's out and about for a bit today.
Yeah, I mean, if she goes, you could have had a funny scene where she goes home or something, and like her parents have like funny like '60s hair or something. I don't know. They could have done something different, but she's just in this one environment. They've obviously got the school set and stuff, and yeah, it's unfortunate. That's just always my problem is they have these great things, these magical items, and they can't really do much with it. They're going to do a limited amount because of the budget or whatever. Yeah.
Budget might be an issue, but I also sometimes suspect lack of imagination.
Hmm. Also, if the
Okay,
budget's like that bad, maybe you just shouldn't do it. You know.
yeah, yeah, scale it back. Rewrite your story to be a little bit more in line with what you need. Okay, so they go to the school's record department and use the year that the White Album came out. So that was the discussion. So, and they narrowed a search to 1968. And I was like, okay, I'll give you that. It was a clever little way to do that.
I thought you were going to look up and tell me actually they got it wrong. It
No,
didn't
then
release.
no, no. I mean, God, if they got that wrong, right? Come on, man.
But they mentioned it repeatedly. I think that's what they were. They must have just been like something significant that happened in that year, and that's the thing they went with. They keep mentioning it. You know.
Mm. Okay, so they find that the locker 22 belonged to a girl named Candy Warren. We know that at this point. Seriously? And they
Mm.
look for an old 1968 yearbook several times, but can't seem to find anything in her. But that's because, as it's revealed, she's in a special section of the book, a special memorial tribute page in the yearbook. The page shows a picture, her name and date of birth, and date of death. Candy Warren, 1951 to 1968. And under the picture, it says Friends Forever. So she died in 1968. And I was like, okay, right, where are we going with this?
Mm.
Now, I'll admit, I really fucking lost my mind here and predicted something that could never have happened because I'm watching Are You Afraid of the Dark? So I was
Yep.
like, she died in 1968. Mr. Schaefer was on her case. He's been a character. He comes across villainous. Oh my fucking God, he murdered her. This is the Lady in White. It's the Lady in White. It's that story from that movie.
I did get that kind of vibe because they do set him up as being quite like an angry, aggressive person, almost like he's harboring some kind of guilt, which he is, but not for the reason you're thinking, unfortunately.
Sadly, I was going too dark for it. Although, to be fair, I think there's an argument to say the whole event is dark in itself.
It's pretty dark, so
Julie's confused as to why Candy's ghost is showing up to her and why do people in the past think she's Candy. You're confused. I'm fucking confused because apparently Candy's ghost has never tried this with anyone else before until you. Now, the only way that could work would be as if nobody's ever been given that locker before.
mm.
Because she's an exchange student, she's over the school's capacity and she had to have this shitty locker. Now that's the only explanation I can have. But the likelihood of that is such a fucking stretch that it's a bit of a thing. But also, why is she taking on the body of Candy back in the day? That
Mm. Yeah, it's just some of those one of those things you just have to just accept because it's easy to tear apart, isn't it?
It is that as well. Obviously, Chris doesn't want to carry on, but agrees to talk to Julie tonight. On his way out, he sees one of the older teachers, a man named Mr. Radu, on his way out, and he asks him about Candy. And the teacher recalls the girl and what happened to her. And in an info dump, because this is what this is, exposition dump, during an after-school science test, she had an accident with a Bunsen burner and gas, dying in an explosion. In addition, the teacher was Mr. Schaffner. Before he became the assistant principal, he worked as a chemistry teacher. And I was like, wait, what? Not only did he keep his job, but he got a promotion? Did they
Yeah,
all hate the girl?
that's exactly my thoughts.
But I mean, again, again, overthinking it here and all that. But in most schools, I mean, maybe because of the era and all that, the gas supply is never going to be strong enough at all, ever, to cause an explosion.
Yeah, it's always like a really small amount, isn't it?
I mean, people are we are of a certain age, having gone to secondary schools when those things in the science with the taps and all that, and teenagers, but other boys were always leaving them on purpose and things like that.
Exactly, but it's things like episodes like this that makes me realize that's why we never had science practical lessons in science class. That they never, pretty much rarely ever use those things, and I think this is probably the reason why.
Um, Chris realizes that the events are about to occur in the past, so he rushes back in to stop Julie. Unfortunately, he's too late as she's already gone back in time and has taken the place of Candy in the past, unaware, basically just following along with what she thinks she's supposed to do. She's left to complete the project alone in the science lab by Mr. Schaffner, but both are unaware that the Bunsen burner's gas valve has a worn out and rotted gas hose. So we're setting up the accident and stuff like that. And I did again go, well, this has got Final Destination vibes because we're seeing the things that would happen and all that. But yeah, not as fun.
Mhm.
Chris is now approached by the ghost of Candy Warren and through her finds out that Julie is in the past. While this is happening, we keep cutting to Julie lighting the burner, but unable to light it in a traditional way, or while gas pumps out. The ghost helps Chris by sending him back to the past somehow, and I'm like, well, what the fuck's the point of the necklace? If the ghost can send you back, what's the fucking point of the necklace?
It made it pretty useless at that point. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. As Julie tries to light the burner with matches, Chris races through the halls, bumping into Mr. Schaffner before breaking free. Chris arrives just as Julie is about to light the Bunsen burner with a lit candle. He startles her, so she drops it, but it starts to roll towards the gas hose, and Chris saves the day by using some sort of puffer to put the flame out, which I thought was a really weird decision because he probably could have saved 2 seconds by just grabbing the candle or blowing it.
Hmm. Yeah, I thought that there was a good level of tension here as he's
Yeah.
trying to get that vapor though. I just thought it was like crazy how that Mr. Schaffner like leaves her alone. She's just a high school student alone with this running gas, fire, and these dangerous explosive chemicals just for a test. It's just kind of crazy that that's the sort of thing they used to do in schools, you know. And I imagine this kind of accident probably happened quite frequently. Maybe that's why they weren't that bothered about Candy's death because it's like, oh, that happens every week.
Oh, Mr. Schaffner killed another one.
And like for the neglects, like you said, the fact that he didn't end up in jail, he got a promotion. Mad.
Absolutely. But you are right. It is a good tension scene. We cut between the two. It's done well. Both actors are good as well in this scene. So it's done, I agree. I did kind of enjoy it as we then lead to Mr. Schaffner barging in, demanding know what they're doing. And Chris confronts him with the hose. Now, this is the scene of the best acting I've seen in one of these episodes in a long time. As Mr. Schaffner's face, he does devastation by the realization that he almost died from this. I was genuinely like, whoa, where did
Yes,
that
and
come from?
quite unexpected. You expect, oh, he's just gonna argue and be like blah blah blah, but he's not. It like really hits him.
Yeah. But then it's ruined by Candy Warren suddenly appearing behind him and finishing Mr. Safner's sentence by saying, I would have been toast. And I was like, well, that just takes away the fucking gravity
Yeah,
of the situation, doesn't it?
hilarious. You burning alive. Yeah, funny joke.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Julie and Chris return to the time, realizing that is what happened to Candy. As they hug, a teacher arrives, wondering what they're still doing here so late. Chris pretends he was helping Julie with a stuck locker, and the teacher reveals that he used to get stuck when she had it too. She then reveals that she is the assistant principal, Miss Warren, aka Candy Warren. And I thought this was baffling. First, she doesn't seem to remember them. Right? Okay, but I don't quite follow that. But Chris and Julie are happy they changed the past. But what I don't understand is, wait, so Mr. Schaffner was responsible for the death of Candy and then got promoted, but he didn't this time, and then what, quit? Didn't just be a teacher anymore? Didn't get what happened? What?
Shh.
Yes. Finally, we see Miss Warren taking the two bullies, Fritz and Donnie, into her office, suggesting that they're going to get in trouble now that she's in charge. Back at the campfire, Evan praises a story with a hippie expression, except for Frank, who can't think of one and says, neato. And that's
Yeah.
it. That's how it ends. And you're like, sometimes I think, God, they really don't know what to do with these poor kids at the campfire, do they?
Not at all. Not at all. Well, I'm not surprised they didn't really know they didn't really even know what to say after that story, to be honest.
Okay, so up in season 2, we've had one bad episode, one great episode, and now, in my opinion, we've got one middling episode.
Yeah.
Right in the middle. There are elements I like. There are things I enjoy. There are parts of the story that are quite well done, and the acting overall is strong. But it lacks what I want. It lacks fright. It's too serious. It's got that fairy tale feel that comes, as you said, from Kirsten's stories a lot. And it just doesn't really feel like a lot of it really matters at the end. The stakes seem low because I don't really get a lot of why it's even happening.
Pretty much, yeah. I think it's a decent episode, like we said, sort of middle of the road where it would sit, and it's a well enough told story, like you said. The acting's good, but just very lacking in the areas that we want it to be. You know, what's the word? Just want to see more horror, basically. I want to see more horror, especially after the previous episode. It's just disappointing to go from that to this. You know, it's such a downward curve, which is a big shame. But like I said, it seems to be a running theme with Kirsten. I'm not sure why they people behind making the show that decided to give these stories to her? I don't know, because she's a girl. Is it because they're supposed to be sort of like a cliche? She doesn't really like the horror and scare. She likes more of these sort of, I don't know. There's like a romantic aspect to them, I suppose, in a way.
Romanticized. That is fucking great.
Mm,
Because I would argue that Kirsten Summers looks like one of the older of the group more than anything else. Maybe a later in her teenage years, a year or two older than some of the others. But I'd argue that what and I haven't paid enough attention, but I wonder, are they trying to give the characters of the Midnight Society personalities based around the stories they tell? Because I'd argue four
mm,
stories in, you're right. I am getting a bit of Kirsten might be lives in a more fantasy world, a more romanticized thing, but it's still always tries to take a dark thing where it's about death and what happened aside from the fucking Sandman episode.
mm. Yeah, I wonder if that's what they did when they were like they made the characters for the Midnight Society. They were like, Frank, you're like the sort of bad boy who likes the blood and the guts and the horror. Kirsten, you're like the sweet girl who likes the more romanticized aspects of horror and like more fairy tale stuff. And like Gary's the kind of nerd who likes the magic. Kind of does feel
Yeah.
like it has a theme, you know?
We'll keep an eye on that with the ones that stay long term and see if that's a consistent thing. Because, like, bear in mind now we've done four stories of Kirsten, we will automatically recognize a similar story later on.
For sure.
All right, that is it. That was episode 3 of Are You Afraid of the Dark season 2, The Tale of Locker 22. You got any thoughts, Nick? You know what to do? Let us know in the comments.
Thank you very much for watching. If you'd like to see more content like this, please consider hitting the subscribe button. It is gratefully appreciated. You can find us over at gbhbl.com, our full website where reviews, news and so much more goes up daily. We're also on all social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Threads, at GBHBL. Just search for GBHBL and you will find us out there. We also have merchandise on sale. You can access the shop via the website.